Earlier this year, we saw the volleyball world absolutely blow up with some rumored new rules coming to the 2026 VNL. And now, obviously, most of them turned out to be fake, but it was a lot of fun while it lasted. Now, liberos won't be serving anytime soon, and they won't be allowed to set in front of the attack line, but the FIVB did come out with a number of new test rules for the 2026 season. Now, the tests will be applied for the 2026 VNL, the FIVB U17 World Championships, and the 2026 Continental Championships. So European Championships, NORCECA Championships, AVC Championships, all of the above. Any update to the official volleyball rules will be subject to review during the testing phase. So that just means that they're testing some things, and this is something that's very normal for the FIVB. Now, I don't know any other sport that goes out and actively tries to change its rules every single year, but that's the case for volleyball. However, I will say I'm actually quite in favor for the majority of these rule changes. The proposal form part of a broader regulatory review aimed at enhancing game flow and simplifying volleyball rules while boosting fan understanding and engagement. Approved rule tests address playing actions, video challenge procedures, coach referee interactions, and pre-match protocol. Now, I'm going to go through all of these rules one by one, giving you my thoughts and explanations on all of the different rules. I'm going to start with the most boring ones, and then I'm going to work my way up to the more and more controversial ones, the more that will affect gameplay and the fan experience the most. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the team rosters. In FIVB competitions, teams may register between 12 and 14 players. Each roster must include at least one libero. Teams may choose to nominate 2 liberos from the registered rosters. Teams will have up to 1 hour before the match to do this. Now, in those rumor rules, they were saying that it was only going to be 1 libero. I like the fact that they've kept it to 2. Now, this actually isn't a change because we've been able to have 14 players on the roster last year and maybe even the year before in the VNL, although the rulebook is very unclear about this. So when we look at what the rulebook has to say about this, team composition 4.11, for the match, a team may consist up to 12 players plus coaching staff, 1 coach, a maximum of 2 assistant coaches, medical staff, 1 team therapist, and 1 medical doctor. Only those listed on the score sheet may normally enter the competition area, yada, yada. But then underneath it says, for FIVB World and official competitions for seniors, up to 14 players may be recorded on the score sheet and play in a match. So I'm not entirely sure how it says 12 on one line and then 14 on another. Is it just 12 for non-FIVB competitions? And then it's up to the interpretations of others. But the thing is like, everyone's going to follow the international rules, right? I don't know a league in the world that actually only offers 12. And ultimately, I think we can all agree that having 14 on the roster is better than having 12. We've seen how this really affects teams comes the Olympics when they can only have that hard cap at 12. And it's been really difficult for teams who especially have been working with a 14-player roster to go down to 12. It's really hard to get rid of 2 of those players sometimes. And honestly, I think the 12-player roster is just a relic of the times when there was no liberos and you only had 6 players on the court. Next up, we have the warm-up protocol. A 90-second separate serving warm-up period will be introduced to the warm-up protocol. Both teams will share the net for the attack portion of the warm-up, but for serving, Team A will have the first 90 seconds on the court, followed by Team B for the same amount of time. The rationale for the adjustment is for athlete safety. I mean, this one is pretty self-explanatory. Both teams used to serve at each other at the end of the serving warm-up. Now we're just going to take turns. As it says, it's a good call for safety, and you know, I like this one. Anyone knows when you're in a gym, that's one of the most dangerous things when teams are serving at each other. Players are serving, they're jumping, it could go underneath them, could cause an injury. No one wants that. Reduced breaks. After the result of a challenge has been transmitted, the team that requested the challenge may not request a timeout before the start of the next rally. The team that did not challenge maintains the right to call a timeout. The restriction applies to both end of rally and mid-rally challenges. Once again, pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it challenges a timeout anyways, so it just eliminates those double timeout situations, as opposed to, I heard there was talks about like, hey, when there's going to be a challenge, the coaches can't talk to their teams. I think that's stupid. How are you going to police that? This just makes it easier and cleaner. Now, use of the referee's whistle. No whistle will be used for a ball landing clearly in or out, or a serve not passing the net, or a clear block touch resulting directly out of the field of play. Once again, pretty self-explanatory. And now, I actually don't think this will have that much of an effect on international and pro levels of volleyball. I mean, we don't really need those whistles. Where I think this will have the most effect, though, is club volleyball. I think this is going to be way better for club volleyball. If anyone spent a long day in a gym, especially in those big convention centers or like a big metal hall, the referee whistles just reverberate everywhere. So I think this is just more for the sanity of players, fans, coaches, and referees alike. Coach to speak to the first referee. The head coach may approach and speak to the first referee to clarify or confirm the type of challenge requested or to seek clarification regarding a call or decision. Complaints and protests remain prohibited. Now, before, the past couple of seasons, I can't remember when they did it specifically, but the head referee was always on the opposite side of the benches. So coaches had to send their captains to talk to the referee, and that's why only the captains could talk to the referee. And now, honestly, I still don't know how I feel about having the referees on the other side. I kind of like them having them on the opposite side and create a little bit of that separation. I'm pretty sure they did it to give you a better view of the net on the broadcast, but this could all be fixed if we just watched volleyball from the baseline like it should be watched. But I digress. Now, before the referee, the head ref could just whistle off the coach and not speak to them. Now the ref will have to engage in the conversation. And I mean, I don't care what the referees say. This isn't going to stop complaints and protests. That's the majority of however coaches talk to the refs. And it's not going to stop. I don't even know why that's there. It's stupid. Substitutions. This is where things start to get, having a little bit of effect, actually. The number of substitutions per set will be increased from 6 to 8. Very straightforward. I think we all know what that means. Now, this doesn't affect the in and out rule. So in international volleyball and everywhere but the United States, there's a 1 in, 1 out rule, right? If I go in for you, you can come back in for me, but that's it. I can't go back in again. In the United States, there's no limit to these subs, and that's why we see the DSs that we see in the NCAA and stuff. And honestly, I really like this. I think that you can just use more serving subs or DS type of player, or you can have more blocking substitutions. Before, if you wanted to do 2 serving subs in a set, that would only really leave you 1 more sub, right? Because you have to go the in and out. Subbing 1 serving sub is actually going to be 2 subs because you have to go the in and the out. So you do that twice, that gives you, 66% of your subs for that set. This just increases it a little bit more, gives coaches a little bit of leeway, a little bit of room to, bring in some serving subs, bring in a DS, maybe bring in a blocking sub, or when you need to, just sub out your entire starting lineup because they're just doing terribly. So now you can sub out 4 of those players instead of just 3. All right, now we're coming into the challenge tests that they're going to be doing. So the test to the challenge system that is still somewhat new to volleyball. So the mid-rally challenge bookmark. Teams may mark any action during a rally that could potentially be challenged at its conclusion. At the end of the rally, if the team loses the rally, it may pursue only one of the challenge they have identified. A mid-rally action cannot be challenged without a bookmark. If both teams bookmark actions in the same rally, the sequence will be reviewed and the first fault observed will prevail. The bookmarking system must be linked to the start rally button to allow faster video review. For reference, the people who are doing the challenge system aren't actually volleyball people. Yes, there's a challenge referee there, but they're the one who's just watching everything and looking. The actual people who are operating the system aren't volleyball people. And now I got to have a few beers with them, with some of those guys and girls after Quebec VNL last year. And it was pretty clear to me that they could sometimes be overwhelmed when a challenge came along, right? There's so many different camera angles and there's so many different cameras that they oftentimes didn't really know what action was being challenged and where it was in the course of the rally, especially if there's a long rally. And how many times have we seen that where, a challenge was made for a long rally and they reviewed the wrong challenge. And then they often had the difficult part of bookmarking, like finding the right camera angle to actually find the proper review on it. So if you bookmark it, it will hopefully just make it way easier for those people to go right to that point, see the action that's happening, and find this specific camera angle that they're going to want to use. I think it'll really help, especially because also oftentimes there may be a little bit of a language barrier between the people who are running the challenge system and the challenge system referee if that person's first language isn't English. So honestly, I think this will make things much, much quicker, and it will take away a lot of the time wasted and while we're waiting for some of these challenges to happen. Once again, I think this is a really good change. Touches in defense and serve receive. Touches in defense and serve receive will be included in the challenge regulations. A clear and visible contact must be shown on video to overturn the original decision. If no video evidence is available, the original decision will stand. This is awesome. This is what we've been calling for a while, previously. And I mean, even in what's going on right now in pro leagues and Champions League and everything like that, you cannot challenge most of the time a play in the back row or on the defense or in serve receive. Right? So you can't challenge to see that if had to touch them. Finally, you're going to be able to challenge that, and it won't just be the block touches that will be challenged for a touch call. Once again, another great change to the challenge system. All right, now we are getting into the changes of gameplay. So this first one is one that we actually saw come into play last year, and I think it's really done some wonders. I think it's one of the best changes we've made in volleyball for a while. Out of rotation error, free positioning of the receiving team. The receiving team must be in correct rotational order at the referee's whistle, but may move once the serving action is initiated. Players may leave their correct rotation position at the moment the server's motion begins, including a step or movement of the arm or legs in the first motion to serve. So obviously, before the rule was you couldn't move until the contact of the ball, which really had like that out of rotation it was always a little sketchy, right? Even as a setter, I was taught to kind of predict the contact of the ball, but you were always leaving earlier. And if you had a ref that maybe didn't like you, or you maybe have been planning a little too much, they would really hunker down exactly when your setter was leaving. So I think this has just been awesome. It's just taken away non-playing points in rotation errors. I mean, it hasn't completely, but you have to be pretty bad at it. And it's just really opened up offenses, because now you're going to see right side players, especially like sprint to the other side. You won't see teams get caught in like awkward rotations, and it just frees up that offense quite a bit. Now, you'll still be able to, like when you're on the serving side, you can basically go wherever you want. Even if you're technically in, position 6, you can go start in position 5 or 1 if you wanted. That rotation will still happen on the serving side. But this is one of those changes to volleyball that I've really liked, just to open things up and open up the flow. But it looks like it's going to be continued on from last year's tests. Double contact interpretation. Double contact during the setting action, second contact, will continue to be allowed, provided the ball remains on the same side of the court. No rule change is required. Once again, this is brought on from last year. It's something that we saw at the NCAA level as well, and this is awesome. I love this rule, and I love it for so many reasons. I think this is a huge change to the game. It's really going to open things up. We've already seen some of the effect in the system where you see middles really more openly, not only taking that second ball, but running more of a tempo set. It allows, players to be a little cheekier with that second set, especially liberos can come out of the back row and dish it off the side and just make things a little bit more interactive. And now, I do think, yes, it does take some of the skill out of the game. I won't lie, but only a little bit, and only where, for me, calling a double was just gatekeeping for gatekeeping's sake. It's almost like it was a rule made by that one guy back in the day who, maybe wasn't a great attacker, maybe wasn't a great passer, but he could set just clean, buttery balls. And he was just like, you know what? Everyone should set as good as me. And I mean, the reality is a perfect set, like a dead ball, as we call it, is the result of having a perfect contact on the ball. It's the type of ball that hitters like the most. So you don't get any advantage other than maybe speeding up your offense a slight bit by hitting a double contact. And the double contact was traditionally called for like hitting the ball twice. And that a millisecond between the two different contacts of your hand shouldn't make a difference at all. Now, imagine if we applied this to American football, and imagine if in American football, the quarterback was required to throw a perfect spiral every single play, and we would call the play dead if it wasn't a perfect spiral. That's exactly what we're seeing here, and I absolutely love this rule. I hope it never goes back. Ball contacting the ceiling. If the first or second ball contacts venue infrastructure above the field of play and remains playable on the same side of the court, the rally will continue. If the ball contacts the ceiling infrastructure and rebounds into the opponent's court, it will be ruled a fault. Contact with a spider can or crane cam outside the field of play will continue to result in a replay. Now, this is something, if you're American, there's no change. This is always what you've been playing with. You can be able to play it off the roof and, off a basketball nets or anything that was above you. Obviously, you can't play it off of walls or anything like that either. And as it says in the rules, you can't have it bounce off one of the rafters and on to the other side of play. For the majority of international and pro gyms, this won't make a difference. Of like the biggest pro gyms, I can only think of Zavierci, where the ball actually touches the roof with any type of regularity. The majority of play is played in big arenas and stadiums where all players come in and try to chuck the ball to the roof or skyball it, and they rarely can. Maybe the scoreboard comes into play, but once again, that is very rare. But I love this. It keeps rallies going. You can make a big dig or you could pass a hard serve and it keeps the ball going. But also, it's kind of exciting. As someone who has played and coached tournaments in the United States, it's kind of exciting, especially if it's caught in something and it's bounced around. Your entire team is kind of waiting down there to play that ball. It's a little bit of an unconventional moment that everyone kind of takes note of and enjoys to watch. So once again, I think this was a good change. Finally, the one rule that everyone wants to know and everyone wants to talk about: push, carry, catch, throw, tip attack. Rule 9.2.2 will be applied strictly in relation to attack contacts. The ball must not be caught or thrown. Attack actions involve chains of direction, two-hand attacks, pushes, open hand blockouts, and carryouts will not be permitted. Only the action of tipping the ball with very short contact will be allowed. Now, my problem with all of this is that when you go look at the rules and you look at rule 9.2.2, it goes as this: the ball must not be caught and or thrown. It can rebound in any direction. Cool. Great. Then you go down and then there's an amendment here for 9.3.3. So you go down and it says 9.3.3, catch. The ball is caught or thrown. It does not rebound from the hit, and that is a fault in playing the ball. So this one is difficult because throwing the ball has become a huge part of volleyball these days. It's really become the current meta that has changed the game, right? Offenses are faster, out-of-system balls are tighter, and we've seen the game in general move to a smaller, faster game where opposite hitters can't just be big, dumpy opposites who are going to get tooled off their elbows. Like, think of the rise of guys like Darlin and Nishida and Miura, right? Right-side players are no longer 6'10", 7-foot monsters. They're now smaller guys who can hit fastballs and hit that ball in tempo. The big question for me is, does this change anything? Does this actually clarify the rule at all? Are you telling me that the rules haven't been followed this entire time and we've just been interpreting differently? Or are we just underlying the rules to say that we have been following them and that everything is going to remain the same? Now, what constitutes a catch, right? Because it's so difficult to say in the moment what is a catch and what isn't. Because before, it was always deemed of like, where are you contacting that ball in relation to your head? Are you contacting that ball behind your head and then pushing it forward? Or are you coming forward and pushing it down? I don't really know. Is it the amount of time that it sits in your hand? And is there like an identifiable time where it's going to sit there and, you're going to throw it? How is that going to be justified? This to me is still a judgment call. Now, what's the difference between a two-handed attack and a jump volley, right? And what's the difference between a two-handed attack and a joust? Like, if the ball is tight, you've got the other team's net, can I still push? A change of direction should have never been allowed. So are we saying that we weren't following the rules before? To me, this is very confusing, and I don't really know what it's going to happen until the FIVB comes out with a video to say, hey, this is allowed or this isn't. We're really just going off of the same rules. We really are. Like, if I tip the ball and it goes off the block, Is that a fault? Actions involving change of direction, two hands attack pushes, open hand blockouts, and carries will not be permitted. So what's the difference between an open hand blockout and a tip? I really don't know. And this is going to be one of those things at the beginning of the VNL is going to be very, very, very interesting. Hell, I think the entirety of the VNL is going to be very interesting because there's no way that every referee in the world is going to be interpreting this call the exact same. So I think once we get to like week 1, week 2 of VNL, it's going to be a little messy and hopefully things are figured out by the European Championships. But overall, how I feel about this, like if we were to eliminate catching and throwing altogether, I don't know how I feel about it. Because on one hand, I love big meathead volleyball. I love when, people are just crushing that ball as hard as they can. I think it's entertaining and I think it's a lot of fun. When people take really extreme, like risky swings at the ball, that is fun to watch. However, on the other half of it, you do get a more error-prone game. And do we really want to bring more errors into the game that aren't going to make the game as interesting, right? With the catching and throwing, you allow the game to be maybe a little bit more fluid, for rallies to go a little bit longer, for there to be a little bit more of a chess match going on, right? It allows you to recycle off the block and maybe reset when you've been in a bad situation. So to me, there's just so much unclarity. I think they've been super clear about all of the other rules, and this is the one that really doesn't show how much has changed and what actually is changing in these rules. Overall, I think the FIVB has done a pretty good job with some of these tests. Most of them will be able to open up the game a little bit more, get that flow going a little bit more, and just have it be generally more entertaining. And ultimately, I think that's what rules should be doing. Like, rule changes should be making the game more fun for fans to watch and more clear for players and fans alike. And I think that's what we're doing here. I would still love to see a change in the net rules. That's one of the big things for me. And I just wish this throwing the ball rule was a little bit more clear, because I don't think it's any more clear than it was a year ago. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think these rules are good? Do you guys think these rules are clear? Let me know down in the comments, and I guess we'll see how things go when the VNL starts in June.